Today we have a major update. Guys, I'm so excited. Amy Siple is back with us again. She's the Kansas City nurse practitioner who was penalized after missing a license renewal while caring for her sick husband. The Kansas State Board of Nursing just dropped her case, and this is a huge victory. But it also exposes why nurses need due process, proportional discipline, and reform before more careers are damaged. Amy stood up, and I am so proud to call her friend. Amy, welcome to Nurses Out Loud. Today's episode of Nurses Out Loud is sponsored by West Cocoa Pharmacy.
Thank you, Jodi. It's my privilege to be here.
I love it. Where were you when you found out that the case was dropped, and what was your first reaction?
Well, my attorney from the Pacific Legal Foundation sent me a text that said that Judge Beffert just signed an order to vacate your case. The Board of Nursing dragged their feet on that. They wanted a dismissal, but my attorney said we need a vacate order. So the vacate would mean that they couldn't come back at a later time, that it would be null and void as if nothing had ever happened. And so that was huge. And so the the board finally agreed. I was supposed to go to court on Monday.
Okay.
The board finally agreed at the last hour. They did not want to go up against Pacific Legal Foundation, and they agreed to a joint motion to vacate, and then the judge signed that. So I was getting ready to give a speech in Illinois to a group in Illinois. 2 minutes before I'm supposed to start speaking, I see this on my phone, so I really can't react or even process it because I've got to get in speech mode.
Right, right. Tell our listeners, what exactly did the board drop, and what does this mean for your record and your ability to practice and really your reputation, because that was on the line?
Yes, yes. So the Board of Nursing claimed that I was practicing without a license. There were a few months, as you stated, when my husband had been diagnosed with cancer. I took a step back from practice, and I just forgot to pay my dues. My CEs were current, my malpractice was current. I just forgot to pay my dues. That period of time was such a blur. And when I went back on the Board of Nursing's website, I saw, oh, I forgot to pay. I'm late paying. So I called them and I just anticipated a late fee, but instead they were going to label me as unprofessional. So it's huge. If once you're labeled as unprofessional, which is the same title you give somebody who sexually assaulted a patient, as you can imagine, your employment options are almost zero. You can find some jobs, but malpractice is going to drop you, or they're going to quadruple the rates, and can't get hospital privileges. I mean, it's just your career's essentially over. So to
Mhm.
have this vacated, it's not a part of any record. It's as if it never happened. That is huge. I'm back to where I was before all this started 2 years ago.
Yeah. And guys, I like to weave in the code of ethics because we don't know it, but this is really where provision one matters, and that's human dignity. Nurses, we look at this as it's just a professional guide for how we treat our patients, but we also owe the same dignity to ourselves. We're not just numbers behind a license, and a process that publicly make someone unprofessional must be accurate, fair, and proportional. And so there's a lot of people that might have missed our first interview. I'm going to throw that link in the show notes because we really go in depth. But summarize what that term unprofessional conduct does to people and why you decided to take on the nursing board of Kansas, because you found out that there were many other nurses like you, right?
Right, right. So unprofessional conduct is this kind of overall arching term that there in Kansas, I think there were over 17 different violations that could go underneath that, including debasing an approved healthcare practice. So you and I would resonate with that too. Or, so they were coming after people for social media posts. They were, it was just, or if you physically assaulted a patient. So it was just this catch-all phrase, rich, which again, I mean, you're not going to be able to get malpractice. You can't get jobs. You're going to, on every application, you would have to include that you have been labeled as unprofessional.
Mhm.
So it's insurance companies won't contract with you if you're a nurse practitioner. They'll drop you, and it's just this scarlet letter, if you will. that you would have to wear in perpetuity forever. And then if you end up on the Office of Inspector General list, which that's happened to nurses for very minor issues, then you can't work anywhere that takes federal dollars, nowhere. So you couldn't even be a school bus driver. And you also can't be licensed for anything else. So you couldn't sell real estate or be a hairdresser. I mean, you're pretty much done if you're on the Office of Inspector General. And there were just so many egregious cases. I talked 3 nurses out of suicide over this past couple of years. It's
Wow.
just horrific. And we found out, at least in Kansas, the Board of Nursing, 2/3 of their discipline cases were just license renewal missteps, just clerical errors. And
Mhm.
you're putting people on databases and labeling them as unprofessional and ruining their careers over clerical errors when you
Yeah.
have gross misconduct out there that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, it's important for listeners to understand Amy was not providing bedside care with patients. She had taken a step away from the bedside, but she still is a professional speaker. So she still was speaking and as a nurse, right? So they treated that as unprofessional. And it's ridiculous how one term they could label nurses that stole medication or nurses that clicked a box wrong on their license renewal with there was no safety net in place for that either. You know, if nurses put in the wrong credit card number by one number just by accident, they just did not renew their license and they didn't reach out to them. Is this correct, Amy?
That is 100% correct. So, yeah, we had all of those cases are exactly what you said. Although, interestingly, if a nurse did steal a patient's medications, they wouldn't go on those databases as long as they complied with the nurse assistant program. But if you put in the wrong credit card number and you don't get your license renewed, and like you said, they don't notify you. And then 2 years later, when you go to renew, they're like, "Oh, you put in the wrong credit card number." So you've been practicing on a license for 2 years. So it's
Unbelievable.
yeah. I mean, it was
Unbelievable.
yeah, that's why over 2/3 of their cases were license renewal missteps, and because that's where their focus was. We were easy targets. I mean, it's not hard to investigate that, and, they could close cases quickly as a result.
But you decided to fight, and you didn't just fight for yourself, you fought for these other nurses, and I'm sure you didn't how did you meet the other nurses that were fighting them as well?
Well, when I first my husband and I prayed a lot about what to do about this, and we were told by everyone, including my attorney, you are facing insurmountable odds. And you can try to, he even said, you can try to be a sacrificial lamb here, but you're going to pay a heavy toll if you do this because no one has ever won against the Board of Nursing. So this is not something that you can win. And I said, well, I'm not guilty of what they're saying and I can't just sign it. So originally, my husband, he's just a real strong man of faith too. And he's like, we have to do the right thing and let the cards fall where they may. And so he said, "Don't sign it, and we'll just deal with them." Like, well, they're going to probably bankrupt us, but we just decided, okay, God, we're just trusting you because when we pray about this, we feel like you're telling us not to consent. We can't consent to things that we're not guilty of, and so then I went to the public, I went to the media, and then other nurses started coming out. And I couldn't believe the stories. Their stories were far more egregious than mine. Mine was the least egregious of any I even heard. And so then at that point, we knew why God called us into this battle. I had a lot of legislative contacts because I was the president for the Kansas Advanced Practice Nurses Association. And through my under my leadership, we got full practice authority through just 2 years earlier. So I knew a lot of politicians, plus my mother had been the speaker pro tem. So I used those political connections as well as my media connections and we started telling the stories, and the legislators were incensed. And we brought the Board of Nursing in for 2 full days of hearings last summer, and the legislators grilled them. Of course, like I said, the Board of Nursing was audited. And then ultimately, we brought a bill against the Board of Nursing, and it passed. And we got sweeping reform of the Kansas State Board of Nursing.
Well, see, that's how God calls us. We never know what that act of obedience is going to do. I mean, I'm sure that you never in a million years thought that you stepping up and fighting this, when you were called to do so, would result in this. And in the news clip that I saw said that all 11 board members were fired or walked away.
Yes. So that wasn't this is what was really interesting about our bill. We accomplished multiple things with our bill. The most important things were how they label you as unprofessional. So unprofessional conduct is a title you can only give a nurse in Kansas if their actions or omissions of actions could have caused patient harm within the practice of nursing. So it can't be for, you know, these license renewal missteps or clicking the wrong box. It also requires the Board of Nursing to go back 20 years and remove nurses from these databases if they just had a clerical error, and that's why they're there. So those were like the big things that our bill did. There were multiple facets of that bill. Like you had to have nurses investigating nurses, and just there were a lot of just really common sense things, multiple items. But and I've worked on legislation before on several bills, in fact. But generally, when you take a bill forward, it gets weaker through the process. Through amendments, it just gets watered down. Ours didn't. It got stronger. The legislators were like, "You're not doing enough. We need to slap them on the hands." And I was saying, "No, we just want reform for nurses. I'm not interested in retaliation or anything else here. I don't want any amendments that could prevent this bill from getting across the line." But they were just insistent. So, kind of at the last hour over in the Senate, actually, my senator added that amendment that they wanted the entire board of nursing to be removed, and then they would be reappointed by the current governor. And then when the next governor comes in January, again, you get a reappointment. So I didn't actually want that to happen. I'm a little nervous about it because, you kind of need a staggering of people on boards, so I don't know. That was not my idea, but I do understand the intention behind it. Although, in my impression, I think it's primarily the staff within the Board of Nursing that are the problem. Because the Board of Nursing, where they meet 4 times a year through Zoom, it's the staff, the bureaucrats and the day to day, but the executive director, under a lot of pressure, resigned. And that was wonderful. And so we've started seeing positive movement in Kansas ever since that happened. And I'm praying that we still will. And we've got a lot of really good people who are trying to get on that Board of Nursing.
If you are a nurse that is fed up with the sick care model, I have a solution for you. My name is Melissa Schreidfatter, and I am the owner and founder of the Functional Nurse Academy. FNA is the most comprehensive functional medicine training program on the market, specifically tailored to nurses. It is self-paced and equips LPNs, RNs, and nurse practitioners to practice functional medicine, address the root causes of dysfunction, and start their independent functional medicine practices. At FNA, you will learn how to order labs, functional health reports, create customized wellness plans, package and price your services, and even how to market your brand effectively. Graduates earn 90 nursing CEUs, and then they qualify for multiple board certification titles. They also will have access to our exclusive tools, such as our Functional Nurse Toolkit, our social media and marketing kit. And I don't want to just train you and send you on your way. So you also will get access to me each month via the Functional Nurse Academy monthly mentorship program, where you will be able to attend a live class with me each month. So say goodbye to sick care and start your dream career as a functional medicine nurse. Enroll today at functionalnurseacademy.com.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That honestly, you think how I would agree that the board members should be fired or resign, because to have this continue for decades, I believe in our first interview, you said that nurses have even committed suicide in the
Yes.
past. Yeah. I mean, a
Yes.
lot of nurses hold being a nurse as an identity, and when that identity is shattered, it's really hard for some of them to go on. Provision 3 in our code says that nurses have a duty to advocate when systems erode trust. And like you said, this case was never just about one missed renewal. It was about whether boards can use technicalities in a way that destroys the trust in the profession, and at a time where they're saying we need nurses.
Right.
It you have to think that there is some kind of agenda here on the other side of it. I just got back or just got into politics after becoming a whistleblower, and we one of the things that people had talked to me about was even if you have somebody that's appointed, if they keep the same staff, it's really the staff that runs all of those branches that they're in. It's the staff that really runs it because they know everything. Yeah.
And that is what's concerning to me. What I appreciate though is the legislature has a stronger pulse on what's going on, and they have recognized this isn't just in nursing. It's in lots of bureaucratic agencies, and I'm sure all your listeners would agree that you have seen bureaucrats drunk on power, whether it's your dog catcher, your home appraiser, or just when you go get your license renewed. Just they're just there's no checks and balances. There's no accountability. I mean, it's really hard to fire a government employee, and you can complain all you want, and what does that do? So it's time for people to start pushing back and fighting back. And so it's really my hope that this situation will reach far beyond the heartland. That within Kansas, we're going to look at other agencies too, but there are other states that are looking at our bill as model legislation. And I'm hoping that there will be more people who are encouraged to push back against this bureaucratic overreach of power. In fact, I just had a governor candidate tell me yesterday, he said, Amy, thank you for bringing this to light. And we need other people to let us know when our bureaucratic branches of government are engaged in overreach of power. And I said, I think probably most of them are, but sure.
Yeah, for sure. I remember back in 2021 with blowing the whistle.
Yes.
At that time, everybody that spoke out against the narrative, we were labeled misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, all of those things. And even the National Council of the State Board of Nursing came out with a white paper on how to handle nurses that spoke out loud on social media. And that was at a time where I had 18 complaints because not only did I speak out, but I literally recorded with my cell phone what was happening in the hospital. And then I used media to get it out to the world because I felt like there was a specific danger to health and safety. And I wasn't wrong. There absolutely was. That video went absolutely viral, 5 million views that it had in just a couple days, and that's with the censorship and being taken down. And today, it probably would have had 100 million views, that we would have had. But again, we are to be the advocate and not only for ourselves, but for the profession and for people. And sometimes you have to walk and through the fire, and we never know what's going to happen. Fortunately for me, the Arizona State Board of Nursing said, okay, we see what you did. I even showed people's faces and their names, and they said, oh, she needs to have an ethics evaluation. And that ethics evaluation cleared me. I was for sure my license was going to be taken away, but I hope our stories, guys, really inspires you to speak up and speak out. We all come from different points of view. We all have a different upbringing. We all have different virtues and character traits that make us who we are. And we are supposed to respect one another. And so, yeah, Amy, thank you so much. I just love that we're friends now, and one day we will meet. Very excited about that. But let's close out this show because I did want to make it short. What should nurses do to protect themselves from this happening?
So the first thing I would say is you are 90% more likely to face board discipline than you are a malpractice suit. So people worry about facing litigation. But the truth is, the data shows 90% more likely to face board discipline. So when you take out malpractice insurance, the primary question you should be asking is, does this policy have license protection coverage? And if it doesn't, change your policy. In fact, all of you out there right now, if you've got malpractice insurance, check that as soon as you get off this podcast. If it doesn't cover license protection, then get a different policy, because that's where your risk really lie. If you are contacted by the Board of Nursing, don't ignore them. You will face additional discipline if you ignore them or if they say you're not complying. But they'll probably call you when you're at the grocery store or you're at work and you answer the phone and somebody will say, "This is so-and-so from the Board of Nursing. I just want to set a few questions for you." And at this time, you need to be very guarded in what you say. So I would say, am I under investigation? If they say, "Oh, we're not sure," or maybe, or yes, then you say, can you tell me what this is regarding? See, you're just asking questions right now. You're not giving information. Can you tell me what this is regarding? And because it might be something from 5 years ago that you probably don't even remember.
Yeah.
And so hopefully you'll have some insight into that. And then your next thing that you say is, I intend to cooperate with you fully, but this is just not a good time for me to talk. Can I get your email? And you will hear back from me or my attorney. And so then try to communicate in writing as much as possible. Once again, you tell them, I intend to cooperate with you fully. I just can't talk right now, because loose lips sink ships. And you need to go back and read the Nurse Practice Act and understand what they're coming after you for. Try to garner as much information as you can. Then what you do is you contact your malpractice company if you've got insurance, which I advise, and you let them know that you're under investigation, and they'll have specific attorneys that they contract with in your area. So they'll get you set up, because you don't want just your Uncle Bob who's a divorce attorney to represent you. You need to have an attorney at this point. And then and they'll be with you, through that process. It is expensive. Don't just sign. There's something, a consent agreement, or it might be called a stipulation agreement. When they present that to you, and probably like 99.8% of people sign that because they just want it to be done. You might have a small fine. They may tell you have to take a certain amount of CEs. Might be a large fine, but they say just sign this and you can get back to practice, so people will sign it. But that is a guilty plea. And once you get that guilty plea, then you're on those databases I just talked about. And they won't tell you most of the time that you're going to go on those databases. So you'll find that after the fact, after the damage is already done and you signed it. So don't sign it until you really think this through. The cost of the fight is considerable, and depending on where you live, we did get something huge through the legislature this year, not just our bill, but we got the agency deference bill passed, which was massive, because in a lot of states, if you go to an administrative court, the judge gives automatic deference to the agency. So like when I went to the administrative law judge, she said, I'm not allowed to consider whether or not your constitutional rights were violated or if what they've done is just. All I can do is see if they followed the Nurse Practice Act, which they wrote. I mean, so you're like, well, why am I even here?
Yeah.
And then if you lose that case, then you get to pay all the fees that the Board of Nursing incurred to take you to court. And if you win, the Board of Nursing doesn't have to follow what the judge says anyway. They can still take action against you. So the whole system was designed so that you would just go along to get along and you wouldn't buck the system, because it's illogical. But if nobody fights, nothing changes. So if you ever do find yourself in a Board of Nursing discipline case, you're welcome to contact me. And some of you out there have committed egregious acts, and I'll have to just pray with you. And, but some people deserve discipline for sure. We want to keep our profession safe, but it's, a lot of these frivolous acts, we all make honest mistakes. That is very different. That's very different. And I would be happy to talk with you. Reach me at amysiple.com. Find friends like Jodi, those of us who can pray with you and just be a source of support, because it's going to be a hard journey, but you will get through it.
Yeah. Amen. Amy, speak to the nurses who are listening to this that may be under investigation right now and feels alone. You and I kind of briefly talked about this today when we were celebrating your win, how we wish we would have known each other 6 years ago.
Right. Definitely, definitely. Yes. I would say this does not define you. So if you don't know Jesus, you need Jesus. And that's what's going to help you get through this for sure. But we also aren't intended to go through things like this alone. A lot of nurses, when this happens, you're embarrassed or you're ashamed. And at first, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't want anybody to know about this. But that's where Satan really thrives, is if you're feeling isolated and alone, then that's when those dark thoughts start coming in and you doubt yourself. And you don't want to be there. So I encourage you that just to stand out in the light, just be honest, get your supporters around you, talk to people about what happened, people that you can trust. For me, just spending a lot of time in prayer and in the word and seeking the Lord through that process. But it's amazing. It is amazing when you let go and let God. He will bring the right people into your circle to help you. So, nurses that I hadn't talked to since I graduated with them from nursing school back in 92 hear about the case because I went public and they're like, Amy, how can I help? It's just amazing. And so we had this strong group that just moved forward on this legislatively. We fought together side by side, and it is beautiful what God accomplished through that. So I just want to encourage you. I know right now the season might be dark, but you won't stay there. You need lean on the Lord and ask him what to do, and he will guide you through it. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on
Amen.
your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths.
Man, that is it. That's it. We never know. Say, his ways are above our ways and his thoughts are above our thoughts. And he never brings you to the fight and not see you through it. Even in my darkest of days, and I go through them kind of regularly, just pushing forward, and then asking God, when am I going to see the fruits of this? And maybe I never will on this side. Maybe I never will, and then I have to be okay with that, but when he brings, people like Amy into my life and lifts me up and encourages me, and you guys sending your messages of how I posted or something had seen you, through a dark time, that's when I get the encouragement to keep pushing forward. So, Amy, we absolutely celebrate this victory with you. I know how much stress and fear and public scrutiny you've been through, but I just celebrate this with you and praise God for a victory.
Thank you. Praise be to God. And I never thought I would say this, but I understand why he brought me into this fight, and I'm glad he did. I never thought I would say that. But, a lot of, somebody had to stand up. We had to stand up and fight. And once one person will stand up like you, then other people will as well. And I think we need to keep the momentum going. There's more to be done.
Yeah, there is. That's amysiple.com, AMYSIPLE.com. And thank you, sister. I'm so honored to have you on the show and celebrate this victory. And until next time, friends, be safe, be well, and God bless. Thank you for listening to Nurses Out Loud. Nurses are called by our code of ethics to keep learning, do the research, and lead with moral courage and integrity, especially as healthcare changes. Keep doing the next right thing, especially when it's hard. If this show resonated with you, please like, share, and follow. It boosts us up in the algorithm so more people can find us. Until next time, friends, be safe, be well, and God bless. And if this episode offers continuing education credit, check the show notes for the learning objectives, disclosures, and exactly how to earn your certificate.